Brother Durrell, discussion this evening is going to continue where we left off last Tuesday on this water of life. So, Brother Durrell, well, you recall last Thursday, I believe it was, we talked about this water and the water of life and how important it was and how serious a matter it is that you and I as Christians be bubbling up and expressing our real love for Jehovah by our activity. Now, it's fine to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and it's real fine to come into a congregation and become baptized, a dedicated individual, but to really carry out our assignment, a lot more is involved than just being a baptized individual with a publisher's card coming to kingdom halls on a regular basis. And we're going to read to you from the drama tonight and help you see that point clear. Now, the reason we mention this is because of things that Jesus has said and what really happens and takes place here on the earth today. Now, we talked Thursday night about how important water was. And now every individual needs it. You cannot live without it, plants, animals, or humans. And we talked about the Bible, how even more important that is, water of life, that no one can ever get everlasting life without it. Now, the sad thing is, when you get to thinking about it, there really is a shortage of water on the earth. A tremendous shortage of water. Let me explain why. You get to thinking about the physical water, and you were to go out here a few miles, you're going to run into the ocean, you might think, well, there's lots of water, so how could there be a shortage? Well, there's lots of water out there. There's some on the earth, some 326 million cubic miles of water. 326 million cubic miles. It's a lot of water. But the problem is with the water that's out there in the ocean, you can't drink it. It's of no value as it stands to humans. It's salty. So really, when you think about it, there's less than 2% of all the water on the earth is fit to drink or could be consumed. But then there's another problem. About 98% of all the fresh water is in a state where you can't drink that. So that leaves a fraction, a very small fraction of all the fresh water is even in a position or condition that you can drink it. Now, let me ask you some questions and see if you can test your recollection of things in the past printed in the Awake. Now, why is it that I say that about only 2% of all fresh water can an individual drink? Why is it? Why can't we drink all of it? Yes, about 98% of all fresh water is frozen. You can't drink it. Remember what it said in the Awake? They even planned to go up to get some of these giant icebergs and pull them into the cities and melt them down in the harbor. It will give enough water to supply a city for a year. So most of our fresh water is frozen, and the rest of the water that isn't fresh, you can't drink it because it's salty and contaminated, so you cannot consume it. So can you see why there's a real shortage of water on the earth? A serious shortage. Now, we're talking about water, and we're comparing water with water of life. And two, there is also a shortage of water of life for people on the earth. Let me explain why I say that. Now, on the earth, there are some 3.5 billion people. There are about 1,600,000 or so Jehovah's Witnesses. And these 1.5 million, you might say, Jehovah's Witnesses have to take this water to 3.5 billion people. That's quite a responsibility. Now, to even get it to see how even more serious it is and what the problem really is, amongst all of Jehovah's Witnesses, those who are conducting Bible studies, there's only about 1,300,000 Bible studies being conducted. And around approximately 800,000 of the witnesses are conducting studies. Can you see now how few people are getting the water of life through a study? 1.5 million approximately people, or 1,300,000, are receiving the water of life through a Bible study. And you have to have a Bible study to take this water of life in regularly so you'll grow and progress so you can become a praiser of Jehovah. And there are less, or approximately 800,000 witnesses that are doing the Bible study work. Now, if we took a cross-section of this congregation, you'd probably find there are approximately maybe 30 or 40% that are conducting Bible studies with people on the outside. And yet there's 3.5 billion people out there
And there's such a small percent of the people are witnesses, and then a small percent of those are conducting the Bible study. Can you begin to see now how serious this problem is? Now, Jesus even was one who talked about the seriousness of it. Now, there's really less than 1% of the people on the earth have the life-giving water and are taking it out to the people. Now, Jesus in the book of Matthew made a statement. I want you to read his statement as to what the problem was. Then I'm going to read you something out of the drama we had this summer. This is in Matthew, the 9th chapter, and notice what Jesus had to say. Matthew 9, and let's kind of analyze his thinking here. Matthew 9, verse 37, Jesus said, in talking to his apostles, he said, the harvest is great, but he said the workers are few. Isn't that interesting? There's nothing wrong with a harvest. There's a tremendous harvest, but there aren't any workers. So there's a few of them, but not enough to get the work done. Now notice his advice to those who are his disciples here. Therefore, he said, see, Jesus always recognized a problem, but then he would never just leave you hanging up in the air with no solution. He always gave a solution. Then he said, therefore, beg the master of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. Now that's his solution. So the solution to get the life-giving water to the people is for the individual who has it to beg for workers. That's the solution. Now, let's see if we can understand that. If an individual is really one who has the water and he's interested in the people, how would this principle really work? Maybe some of you could explain it to me. Let's have a little discussion on it. How would this really work? Are we going to go home and sit down and start begging now for some help? How does it work? Sister Durrell? First of all, you're going to be out there working. You're going to be working until you have no energy or strength left. Then what are you going to do? All right, we should pray, but in what manner should we be doing this, Brother Guevara? All right, we should prepare them. Beg and plead. We should plead with Jehovah. In your prayers, they should be pleading. You should be begging. Please send out help. And of course, you would never get down and beg and plead unless you saw something. What would it be that you would see? Brother O'Keefe? Yes, you'd see it. You'd recognize it. How many of you that have been out in the service with us this week recognize there's a great harvest out there? Every single one of you that's been out with us this week recognizes it. There's more interest out there than you can begin to touch. The group I was with this morning, I never saw anything like it. We started out this morning, we couldn't find any interest, Brother Case and I, for about 30 minutes. And we ran into so much interest we didn't know what to do with it all. The group we were with. I don't know about your group. We got some here from Ramona. Is any interest up in Ramona? Tremendous interest. You can't even begin to take care of the interest. Jehovah says, I'm going to speed it up in the final days. And he is speeding up this work. Now, he's speeding up those out there that show interest, but the question is he speeding us up so we see the issue, so you will beg the master for help? Plead and beg. Now, of course, you wouldn't be begging the master if you weren't out there working, because you'd look like a hypocrite. You're not going to beg unless you're first of all doing the work. And then you're going to beg. If you're one of his disciples and following his advice, you will beg. Now, if you were to beg for workers, what do you think is going to happen? According to Jesus. Well, of course not. Jesus wouldn't tell you to do something that would produce no results. Jesus sees the problem, he gives you the solution, and the solution is work and beg, and you're going to have results. Now, some of you that have been working and begging, I don't know, are you having any baptized in this congregation in the last year for the case? Sure. Some of you are producing results. And I would venture to say the ones that are have been doing a little begging and a little working, because you can't get there any other way. Beg and work. Now, you're begging, the one that you're begging of is the master, the one who owns the field. You see? And you're asking him to send out more workers. So when an individual asks for more workers, first he's the worker, and those that come back out into the field to help are workers also. In Jehovah's organization, Jehovah's Witnesses are workers. Now, I want to read you something from the drama that we saw this summer on who will escape and stand before the Son of Man. Now, in this drama, it points out something very interesting about congregation. And we're going to tie this down tonight to the Vista South congregation. What is said here applies directly to this congregation. Now, I want you to listen to it because it involves you and I. We're going to put me in this congregation with you this week. So this applies to you and I directly. Notice what it says. This is the introduction of the drama. The question is, who will escape and stand before the Son of Man? No one of us can ignore this searching question prompted by our Lord Jesus Christ. As recorded at Luke chapter 21, verse 36, Jesus said to his disciples, "Keep awake then, all the time making supplication that you may succeed in escaping all these things that are destined to occur and in standing before the Son of Man." Now, he's advising his faithful followers this information. Then the question is, it says the question reaches down to all of us, from the oldest to the youngest member of the congregation. As the average congregation gather for their weekly service meeting, Brother Zeb, an overseer, gives a brief talk with the purpose of helping all in his congregation to face this question squarely. It says, we are letting all of you here listen in on this talk because it outlines the situation that exists generally in all the congregations. Now listen to the situation that exists in all the congregations. And we're one of those congregations. It says this. What is our attitude? Well, the congregation is doing well, and we are happy to see many new ones coming in. But how do we individually stand as to being awake, making supplication day and night, really showing concern about what? About our standing in the congregation. One thing that they help us to make is to make a personal examination, is to evaluate, is the evaluation of the congregation as a whole. And what do we see? It is noted about 1/3 to 1/2 of the brothers and sisters really make themselves a full functioning part of the congregation. Let me read that again. Now here's where the seriousness comes, brothers. Not all of us in the congregation are doing the work we're assigned to do the way we're told to do it. Let me read this again. It is noted that about 1/3 to 1/2 of the brothers and sisters really make themselves a full, functioning part of the congregation. 1/3 to 1/2. That means 1/2 or 2/3 are not really a functioning part of the congregation. Let me go on and read to show you what they mean by what they say. By this, it says, I mean that these 1/3 or so show themselves not just passively, mildly interested, but have real concern for the meetings, taking part, carrying on their service with a purpose. They show interest and enthusiasm for the things the congregation plans. That means for the service this week, when you have a special representative, there was just about 1/3 here. They show themselves a concern for the operation of the congregation. Then it says this. For example, when a special talk or program is announced, they enthusiastically invite people to come. Further, they are interested in the Kingdom Hall, being there to clean it, and interested in the people in the field. In short, they are there when things are to be done. Then it says, now on the other hand, there are others in the congregation who attend meetings. Oh, they're pleasant, all right. They go in the service, true, but they do not seem to be in the middle of things, not really a living, functioning part of the congregation. They're here, but that's where it ends. They are, in a sense, fringe members. If others did not keep things going, where would they be? Now, we don't want our meeting attendance and our service to be just a token. We want it to be us. We want our souls to be in it, whatever one of the various Christian ministries we are performing. So according to the way the society puts it, brothers, not all of us are out there working and begging the Master for help. We are fringe members. We're giving token service. And will that get you and I life? Never. Now, after this was read, you remember as the drama starts developing, there was a man that came out on the stage with his wife, or in the front field, and his name was John and his wife was Debbie. Remember what John said after he heard this same words that I just read to you? He says, you know, honey, I think Brother Zeb was a bit strong in what he said. You think I was a bit strong in what I said? Well, you know what happened to John and his wife and his son before the drama ended. It cost the life of their son. Now, in the conclusion, here's what they say. Do we really love the truth? Who were they asking that question of? Let me ask you. Who were they asking that question of? What people? Asking this of Jehovah's dedicated, baptized people who say they are his witnesses, those that expect to get life. They ask them, do you really love the truth? Do we demonstrate appreciation for it by our love for Jehovah's name, its congregation, its association, and its work? Do we see that our children are getting a standing before the Son of Man? Or are we bringing them to ruin along with the ruin of our own standing before the Son of Man by permissiveness and neglect towards them? The Apostle Paul says, keep testing whether you are in the faith. Keep proving what you yourselves are. If we really love the truth, if we are in the faith, we will not hold back figuratively, even to pick up a garment to salvage something from this world to the neglect of our spiritual interests. We will stay clear and clean from Christendom and from loving the things of the world. Moreover, do we care for the poor people who are now suffering from spiritual starvation and oppression? They are in the shadow of death. We who know the truth can help them. Only our bringing the truth to them can help them to get out quickly from this doomed system. Then it says, let us aid yet many of them to escape and stand before the Son of God alongside us. And we do that by doing what the Master said, working and begging and pleading for help. Not putting in token service, not being a fringe member, not just being one who comes to Kingdom Halls, thinking somehow Jehovah being sentimental is going to give me life along with my children. Jehovah only gives life to those who are whole-souled in the work assigned to be done. And can you see why? He had his Son die for these people out here. And these people in the world have absolutely no hope. Absolutely none. I used to be in a congregation up north here with a couple here from Ramona. Been 3, 4, 5 years ago, I don't know. But not that long. Things were bad then, weren't they? What's the world condition like now? It's deteriorated at a rapid rate. Everything's wrong, nothing is right. And some of the witnesses have to be told this kind of information to try to spur them and move them to do something about it. And when the society talks strong like that, brothers, there must be a serious problem. Less than half are really a functioning part of the congregation. This is talking about the dedicated baptized ones. If you'd like to, you can look at this when we're through. So, brothers, we don't want to be stingy about this water of life that we have. If we've got the water and there are people who need it, they should be getting it from us. It should be circulating and bubbling, and it should be flowing in a generous sort of a way so they can get the water and have a real hope for something better. Don't you think they're deserving of it? I think they are. Jehovah thinks they are. His Son thinks they are. So we should feel that way and be acting accordingly. Now, the people are really in a parched condition. The people of the world are, like we've said, are, because of a lack of water, are suffering hallucinations. Even the politicians think they're going to solve their problems. And the more they toy with it, the worse it gets. But like I say, Jehovah is doing his part of the work. Now, if you go back to let's say about 66, and were to check the records of how many hours it takes, or gallons of life-giving water to produce one of Jehovah's Witnesses, it took about 16,000 hours of preaching for each one that was baptized back in 1966. Do you know how many hours it took last year to produce one baptized, dedicated witness? It took 1,789 hours. Can you see the difference? From 66 to 72, from 16,000 hours to 1,709. So Jehovah is speeding things up. But the question is he speeding us up? Are we moving according to the needs of the people? Now, this is scripture I want you to read, and now let's see if we can understand what it's about. Here's in the book of Revelation, the 22nd chapter, and this particular scripture, it's not a political promise. This is made by someone who will see that it's carried out. Revelation 22:17. Now notice what it says. It says, "And the Spirit and the bride keep on saying, 'Come.' And let anyone hearing say, 'Come.' And let anyone thirsting come, and let anyone that wishes take life water free." So this invitation is given to who? Who's this invitation to? Anyone know? Please? Yes, to the whole world of mankind, all 3.5 billion people. They're invited to come and get the water. But if there's only going to be about 800,000 of us, or less than half of us, that want to give it to them in the form of a Bible study, if they were to rush in on us now, what would we do? We'd be proving the Christ a liar. We can't do that. He's given the invitation, so he's saying to the people, here it is. And he's staking his word on us, that we'll give it to them if they were to come. You think if all the people in Vista swarmed down on us, would you all be willing to conduct a half a dozen or 10 or more Bible studies? Would you? How many of you would? Well, if you're willing to do it, then we ought to get out there and do it. Because the interest is there. If that's what we're really interested in, if we really are interested in the people, and we're interested in seeing that this is carried out, then we ought to be out there doing that work, looking for the people, because they're not going to swarm in on us. If they were to swarm in on us the way it stands now, remember what Jesus said would have to happen? Something else would give them the life-giving water. What was it? The sister? The rocks would cry out. Maybe those rocks in the back of the hall here in the concrete would do the talking. Wouldn't that be a shame if people swarmed in here and the rocks start talking? And the witnesses were sitting there? Because the invitation is out to all the people. They are invited to come in to get the water. And Jesus said, if we won't do it, he'll have the stones do it. And he can move stones, so if he can move stones, you ought to move us. That's for stone-hearted. We should be willing to move and speak and talk, because there's good people out there. They're just as good as we are. Some of them a whole lot better, maybe, as far as people are concerned. Good people. Blind people, not knowing the way. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you some questions. And the witnesses were sitting there? Learned in the last 6 months, because it involves, bringing this water to people involves what we know. You can't do much about teaching others when there's things we've got to learn ourselves. So let me ask you these questions that we've made up and had on the board for the last week, and let's see if we can understand fully what some of these points are, because they're very important. In fact, this one little question I had at the beginning here has to do with Jesus walking on water. In the book study the other night, I asked about that, and no one really understood how far Jesus walked on water. Remember when he walked on water? And nobody really understood how far it was he walked on water. And one of the little sisters was going to tell me the answer. How far did Jesus walk on water? Sister Kleinfelder? 3 to 4 miles. Where did she get that information? Do any of you know? Yes, there's a chapter in the Great Teacher book. Can you imagine that? He walked out on that water 3 to 4 miles on a storm-tossed Sea of Galilee. Kind of interesting. Now, these new things learned we've been talking about go back to the March Watchtower. The first question I had was, why does the Bible call Spiritism a work of the flesh? Now, why do we call Spiritism a work of the flesh, please? All right. It doesn't produce the fruitage of the Spirit. What does it produce, Spiritism? Produces something else, Sister Durrell? Yes. Produces some of the works of the flesh. Mm-hmm. All right. Now, the second question was, what was Jesus' attitude when he was offered drugs, and why did he adopt this attitude? Now, what was his attitude, first of all, when he was offered drugs? Please? He refused them. Now, why did he adopt this attitude? Why would he refuse drugs?
He wanted the mind clear, his mind clear, so that he could read Jehovah's will.
All right, very good. He wanted a clear mind. Sister Jones?
He also wanted to read on Jehovah's Spirit and not a false sense of drugs.
All right. Yes, very good. So he could see the seriousness of using drugs. Now, the third question, why do Jehovah's Witnesses bar the practice of drug abuse within their congregation? Brother Claxton?
Yeah, it doesn't allow a person to function with the whole mind.
He isn't in charge of himself, so to speak. So in this state, a person would be under the influence of the demons, perhaps to the extent that he did something that was very displeasing.
Yes, he couldn't be a whole soul, could he? All right, so we'll have to leave these drugs alone. Now, what about the subject of, some people take drugs for the strangest reasons. What are some of the reasons people take drugs for, other than just, we sometimes think of a drug user as one who's down under the culvert over here with a needle in his arm. But, Sister Diaz? True. But, Sister, please? Yeah, people take drugs for sleeping all the time. Always taking drugs for sleeping. Now, name some other. Sister Jones?
Sometimes they use them to lose weight, to using willpower.
Yes. They try to replace Jehovah's Spirit with some drug. Sister Durrell?
Tranquilizers are quite common.
Yes, they're very prevalent. Now, here's a good question. Does John 1:4-8 mean that we will always be absolutely fearless in the face of danger? Who would like to read 1 John 4:18? Let's find out what it says. 1 John 4:18. Let's see if we can understand what the scripture is about. Brother, please. Yes.
There's no fear in love. The perfect love goes fear outside, because fear exercises the restraint. He that is under fear is not to be perfect in love.
Well, then the question again is, does this mean that we will always be absolutely fearless in the face of danger? What does that mean? Brother Guevara?
We have to have a certain amount of fear, which will cause us to become cautious and use a sound mind in certain conditions.
All right, that's true. Sister Durrell?
To act in harmony with our prayers and have a prayer time until we speak to Jehovah. Otherwise, we would have some fear and a lack of, we would have a retarded speech for Jehovah.
Yes. All right. Any other thoughts? Okay. Please.
Perfect love, one that is not under development.
All right. Very good. Very good. We should be fearless when we talk to our God because we love Him, we have a good conscience, and we know He'll listen and understand. So we have no fear. But when they come running at us with a rifle and bayonet, are we going to be fearful? I am. I don't know about you. All right. Now let's see. It's question 6. Why has Jehovah permitted the fierce persecution of our brothers in Malawi? Why does He allow this fierce persecution? And it's the new book says we're going to be tested to the point of death ourselves. Why does He allow that? And it said something at the assembly in one of the first talks about these people in Malawi and other areas dying. It means something interesting. It means something very important to us. When Jehovah allows those people to die, that should tell us something. Mr. Jones?
During the Great Tribulation, some of Jehovah's people were going to die at that time also.
True. Durrell?
Right after it actually means glory for us because we're taking part in a work that we're dying for and the people are actually dying.
Can you imagine that? That's why it's so, like Jesus said in the Revelation, those that are lukewarm in carrying out the work, He spits them out. In other words, they make Him sick. It makes the glorified Christ sick when one of His witnesses in an area where there's freedom will sit there when Jehovah is allowing other people in other parts of the world to die to get this work done. It's such a privilege to do that people will die to do it. And then others that have the freedom won't do anything. So it's something that brings glory to us that are without this opposition and persecution. People are willing to die to do this work. Can you imagine that? And we have this freedom. Total freedom now. We could go out here in the downtown en masse and witness, and no one would bother us. And those people are being raped, maimed, and killed for just the privilege of doing that work. Think about that. Okay. Mr. Kleinfelder?
I thought it was interesting that the people that run it, they don't even view the persecutors as those. And I hope that they'll turn around next to the truth.
That's right. Sister Brooks?
What is true and what is false, and it's very definitely so among the people that they live.
Yes. Isn't that interesting? Please, sister?
So we are warned that we will.
Yes. Now, when the tribulation hits, of course, we'll not have any persecution, and Jehovah's Witnesses will be protected and none of us will be killed. Is that it? Brother Dugan.
Ezekiel brings out that we shouldn't be surprised if we complete world dictatorship. There hasn't been dictatorship yet where there hasn't been persecution.
Very good. Yes, we could all, as a group, will be saved. Isn't that the way it is? And as individuals, we may not. So it's serious business. We can't think we're going to coast along here. Now, let me ask you another question. Upon whom does blood guilt rest today? Where does blood guilt rest, please?
On ancient Jerusalem, modern counterpart Christendom, and blood guilt is a record standard for itself.
Now, does that mean just the clergy? Now, and here's another good question. Will the Armageddon survivors be clean from blood guilt? Now, let's say all of us here survive. Are we clean from blood guilt? Isn't that interesting? We're not free from blood guilt and we survive Armageddon. Now, let's see if someone could explain that particular question. Brother Diaz?
We're going into the city of refuge because we are blood guilty as a Methodist community.
All right, and please.
The article was also pointing out about the high priest still being alive and still providing a sacrifice in our behalf. The one who went into the city of refuge was not free to leave that city of refuge until after the high priest died. Therefore, he was still blood guilty.
Will we always be blood guilty then? Yes, isn't that something? Take 1,000 years and then we'll be free from blood guilt. Now, I just was thinking about that. Christ Jesus was quite powerful. Remember, he could go out into the ocean and he could say to the sea, calm down, and it would calm down and the storm would go away. He could say to a tree, wither up and die, and it would die. He had tremendous power. But it's going to take him, with all that power, 1,000 years to make us perfect. That's what you call being in a mess. And some of us kind of get the strange idea we're close to perfection now. You couldn't get any more imperfect. We're the most degenerate of all humans that have ever lived on the earth. It's going to take 1,000 years to do anything with us. Think about that for a while. Here's a good question. Will those resurrected to the earth still have blood guilt? What about those who have died and resurrected? Do they still have blood guilt? Sister, please. They've already paid that penalty. Isn't that interesting? So they don't have blood guilt, and we survivors will have it. But now there's more to be said about them. Even though they paid the price for their blood guiltiness, do they need Christ, or where do they stand? Please, Brother Beebe. Yes. Isn't that interesting? Sister Jones?
Final test after this 1,000 years, so they need Jehovah's protection to come through this final test.
Yes, they will. So, they don't have blood guilt, but they need Christ as bad as we do, really. Here's a question. How is a person marked in the sense described in 2 Thessalonians 3:14 and 15? Now, there it talks about marking an individual. How is an individual marked? How do we do a thing like that? All right, Brother Ramirez?
There are particular offenses which would not warrant being disfellowship. However,
such as what could it be? It's not immorality, gossiping, or maybe dating worldly people, or huh? Well, that's a disfellowshipping offense. The idea, Brother Guevara?
Dating worldly people or seeking worldly associations.
Yes. All right, go ahead, Brother Ramirez.
What the brothers would want to do, of course, they would not want to really shut these brothers down, but of course help them by means of watching them or inviting them, so to speak, inviting them out or keeping a tab on them, so to speak, to ensure that they not need for this help, to bring them back in line with
all right. Now, who is it that does the marking? Now, who marks an individual? If I want to be marked, who's going to mark me? Individuals in the congregation. In other words, you could mark me if I was having bad association and so on. How does this marking go? How do you do this?
You're trying to you're not over-defending with them, show that you don't approve of what they're doing.
All right. Oh, all right, please.
Association outside of the community hall or the
Yes, Very good. And let's see, I saw, please, sister? Yes. Yes. All right. Would the elders in the congregation do the marking for the Guevara? No, elders never do that. Would it be announced on the platform for the case? Yes. I mean, you might mark me, but she might not mark me. Okay? See, it all depends. Up to the individual. Sister, yes. And Sister Diaz? Yes, you've got to be very careful about conscience. Can't force your conscience on someone else. All right. Those are good points, aren't they? That was a scripture that was very misunderstood not too long back, wasn't it? Here's a good question. Time's running out here. On what basis is Jehovah's organization now urging all dedicated servants of God who are users of tobacco to put away the habit? On what basis do they encourage getting rid of this smoking habit? I hope you have none of them here. But on what basis? Please, sister? Yes. Wouldn't that be ridiculous if someone carried the smoking habit on into the new system and while they were going around burying bodies, he'd say, hey, before you bury him, check him for cigarettes. I'd just run out. So it'd be hard to find, wouldn't it? All right?
Narcotics. Nicotine is definitely a narcotic, which is 80%
All right. What else do they say? Mr. Jones?
Some of the brothers were still smoking cigarettes that were brought out, and because of this, they didn't have all the Jehovah's Spirit.
That's right. Good point. Please?
This is not just a dictatorial law that's being laid down by Jehovah's organization. It's being done out of love. Love for Jehovah's clean organization to begin with, and love for the individual to continue living in Jehovah's organization.
Yes. And Brother Gobar?
Nicotine is a form of drug that enslaves one. And a true servant of Jehovah God, a person is not a slave of anyone except that he's under his himself.
Yes. But someone who smokes, you know, they're carrying and living what? What would you call it? They're living Sister Brooks? They're living a lie. You ever see someone that smokes and you approach, they'll try to hide their cigarette? Try to hide the smoke. Sister Durrell and I ran into one sister we knew up north that we was active in the truth, and we saw the smoke billowing up, and we approached her from the rear, and when she saw us, the cigarette disappeared. We think she swallowed it, but we're not too sure. But the cigarette just disappeared. I don't know how she got rid of it. So people do strange things. The question 12, what should be our prime reason for desiring the new order? Now maybe you can tell me, what is your prime reason for desiring the new order? Now let's say more about that. Well, what about the spiritual paradise? Peace, unity, Sister Bush? Isn't that nice? Those are the things that make happiness, aren't they? A big house doesn't make happiness. Big building. Brother, please? Claire? Yes, that's important to it. And name some other things about this new system. Righteous government. Instead of turning on Watergate, you turn on about how things are going smooth. Wouldn't that be a twist? Please?
Qualities of Jehovah God. We find that righteousness is going to dwell in consistent things. Truth and kindness is going to be the qualities that express. These are not material things.
Don't even need those other things. See, this society's gotten so out of balance, all of us humans have the attitude that it's material. We've got to get these material things. And we shove everything aside to get the material things. And the witnesses who are not the active ones are still the ones that are pursuing the material things. The one who pursues righteousness and peace and all these spiritual things, he just throws those other things in the background and they mean absolutely nothing to him. Being with Brother Franz at the assembly, Fred Franz, And being around him for a while, it's, what an impression that gives you. There's a man who's not remotely interested in material things. Not even remotely. Very spiritual. And yet, we get tied up in these physical things. Physical things we can get now, any one of us, if we want them. It's the spiritual we don't have, and that's what's going to kill us if we don't get them. Gotta get rid of the other. Grab onto the spiritual. Here's a question. Why is it important that we begin now to make adjustments in our personality? Why? Brother Guevara?
It's not going to be the same. We're going to be the same person, the same person. So we have to change now in order to be fit for the new system. And that the great tribulation Armageddon will make a miraculous change in our personality for the better.
We'll change a thing. Do we have any examples of why tremendous disasters and events don't change people?
In a short time, you're back there rolling down and doing along.
Right back to the same old mess.
For a while, but then it's come back to the same thing. That was what I said, it'll block us from reaching perfection. You can ask yourself from reaching the goal that we're after.
Yeah.
We tend to be the world tendency.
Yeah. That's Sister Brooks?
It's possible to be found in God, and so if we start using those things now, we'll be in a far better position to accept the instructions that we have on the new soul.
Oh, there's going to be instructions, written instructions that we have to follow? Don't we have written instructions now? Let's say we won't follow these instructions now. What will you do when a new set of instructions come out? Brother Guevara? You won't follow those either. If you won't do the preaching and the teaching now outlined in this book, you will never do what you're told here either. Don't ever think you're going to change and you're going to click some switch. And all of a sudden you're a different person. Ain't so. Same old you going to be there, doing exactly what you're not doing now. And when we talk in these dramas, about 30 to 50%, if every one of Jehovah's Witnesses went on into the new system, that 30 to 50% would still be the only ones doing what they're supposed to. The others would be right back where they were. That's right. That's why they are not going to survive. See, those that survive the tribulation and Armageddon, what do they become in the new system? A whole foundation pillar of a new society. And any of you that are in the building work, do you build houses on mud or sand? You do that, Brother Newman? Try not to. I know he doesn't. But some of us build our faith on that sort of thing, and it won't work. So if we see these flaws in personality, then we have to change them, and we have to do so drastically. So we thank you for all of your comments, and isn't it good to review these things? It's interesting how little we retain until we research things. Your mind just loses it. That's why discussion and meditation is very important.